Chapter 11. I don't want to know that. Why didn't you tell me? Serious POV. Waking Remus up with a blowjob was something he had been planning to do for some time. First, he'd gotten permission from his Moonie to surprise him with such a thing. Then, he'd tried to discern a way to wake up before Remus without alerting him of the plan. Therefore, waking up the next day to find Remus still snoring softly and curled around his back presented the perfect opportunity. After he had managed to maneuver the much larger man onto his back, his legs naturally splaying, he settled between them and took a moment to trace his eyes over bare skin, rubbing a gentle thumb over the purpled marks he'd left in the days before. He tongued at Remus's soft cock and suckled it into his mouth. He was familiar with the pleasure-filled haze that accompanied having something in his mouth, specifically having Remus in his mouth. A few minutes of stimulating Remus with his tongue and gently massaging his balls with a free hand had the appendage fattening up in his mouth, taking up more and more space and causing him to think more carefully about how he was using his mouth. Pushing his forearms under Remus's thighs and wrapping them up over the man's hips, he doubled down, taking the thick cock as far into his throat as he could, saliva dripping out of the corners of his mouth and slicking the way. When the man's hips began to hitch upwards, his tongue picking up the salty tang of pre-cum, Sirius finally let his moans loose, working his cock down into the tangle of sheets down the end of the bed. Remus groaned, slowly coming awake. Bug? Pulling back, he began stroking his cock and instead let his mind drift, sucking gently at the man's sack and humming as long fingers wound through his dark tresses, wild from going to bed damp and unstyled. As Remus's grip tightened and directed him back towards his throbbing shaft, Sirius panted against the damp skin and murmured a "good morning." "Certainly is," Remus agreed, his abdomen tensing as he sat up to watch the show Sirius was putting on for him. "Did you wake up needing something in your mouth? What a good boy you are. So quiet for me." The praise sent sparks to Sirius's groin, hips grinding in slow circles as he traced the vein which was pulsing steadily along the underside of his cock with his tongue, strumming at his frenulum until a soft swear from above him drew his attention. Resorting back to basic methods so that he could watch his Moonie fall apart with wide eyes, he turned back into Remus's constant stream of dirty talk. "You look so pretty with my cock in your mouth, Bug. Wish you could see yourself. Fuck. God, I'm the luckiest, aren't I? My favorite boy, always so eager to please me, waking up so nicely." With a deep breath, Sirius let his head drop until his nose was pressed into the neat hairs at the base of Remus's cock. The smell so purely Remus, a mix of his soap and sweet, and so much that it brought him closer to the edge. And Sirius belonged to him. Their conversation last night of collars and marriage and forever. God, just imagining a world where Remus had him collared, using him solely because he wanted to. It was a future he could really envision being a part of. Remus's breath whooshed out of him as Sirius's throat tightened around the sensitive head of his cock. "Christ, Sirius. Fuck, you're so good at that. You're gonna make me come. Come up here, honey bug." The man pulled at his hair until he was only connected to his shaft by a messy string of spit. "Come here. I want to kiss you." "You are so close." Sirius's voice was hoarse as he clambered up Remus's body to sit astride him, unable to stop himself from running down into his stomach as they kissed. "Wanted you to come." "Oh, but I wanted to kiss you, and we both know." Remus bit at his lips, moving down the side of his throat as he encouraged the movement of his hips. "That I'm in charge here." Sirius moaned as Remus nipped his pulse. "But I'm a good boy." "You're my good boy," Remus confirmed. "But that means you do as I ask sometimes, Bug. You don't always get your way." Oh, Lord. He was so hot when he was bossy, and it made him whimper as he got closer and closer to the brink of orgasm, his hard cock blurting pre-cum onto Remus's abdomen. "Does that mean I can't come yet? I'm so close, Ree." Remus teased, shifting them so he could wrap a spit-slick palm around both of them and stroke in time to the rhythm of their hips, laughing when Sirius cried out and dropped his head to rest on his collarbone. Feeling a heavy kiss on his head, he sighed in relief when his Mooney said, "I think you've earned it. Come when you need to." It never got old, falling apart in Remus's arms, but it also hadn't yet stopped being new. He still found himself gasping, shuddering as he came. With one hand in his hair, holding his head to his chest, the other stroking his cock quick and fast, he cried out as he orgasmed, his cum caught by Remus and used to bring the other man off. Fuck, you look so pretty when you come," Remus babbled as he stripped his cock harshly, Sirius staring at him with wide eyes, panting as the pleasure radiating through his body turned to the pain of overstimulation. "So good for me. Christ." Thankfully, Remus followed him shortly afterwards, and so the too much pleasure pain ceased, and Sirius snuggled down into Remus's cum-covered chest and lapped gently at the salty fluid. "Good wake-up call?" "Fuck," Remus breathed, stroking Sirius's sweaty brow with his gentle fingers. "You know it was." After a luxuriously long morning shower, in which Sirius stared his boyfriend down as he stretched himself with 2 fingers, and Remus followed through on his promise to plug him up for a day, the pair were a picture of kinky yet domestic bliss. "Do you feel ready to speak to James?" Remus asked as they made coffee side by side. "No," Sirius leaned into his side. "I just don't get it. Why wouldn't he just tell me?" "I think you need to talk to him so that he can explain it to you," the other man reasoned. "The two of you have been friends for so long, and based on last night, he knew he was in the wrong." "I guess," Sirius sighed. "Will you come with?" "Sure, Cuddlebug." Remus screwed the tops onto their travel mugs and pulled Sirius into his chest for their 27th hug of the day. "Are you sure you're happy to wear this?" He tapped 2 fingers on the base of the silicone plug, laughing a little when it made the smaller boy shudder and mule. "To go and see him?" "Yeah," he breathed. "It's a nice little distraction." "Okay then, if you're sure. Are you ready to go? Get it out of the way?" "Okay." He'd spent the drive across the city, shifting carefully in his seat, the plug in his ass pressing against his prostate and doing just enough to keep his cock at half-mast in the loose sweats he'd had to borrow from Remus. As they got closer and closer to his flat, Sirius got more stressed, nibbling his fingernails and bouncing one knee to try and distract himself from the messy conversation awaiting him. "You'll be all right," Remus reassured him for the 3rd time in the last 20 minutes. "I'm here with you, and James and Regulus both owe you a conversation in the least. You don't have to forgive them right away, either. Not if you don't feel ready to." "I know," he gulped, as Remus indicated to turn left down his street. "I just really hate confrontation." "Oh, I know." The older man's tone had dropped into the soft, soothing voice that he recognized from the aftercare portion of their scenes. "But it's all right if you'll get upset, Bug. I'll be here for you, and once it's done, you can put it behind you." The walk up to the flat was a new experience, foreign objects shifting inside him, and knowing looks from Remus setting his face aflame. With keys jangling in the lock, Sirius took a surprised step back when the door was jerked open by someone who was not him, nor was it James. Mouth falling open, he took in the excited smile of one Euphemia Potter, who held her arms open for a hug that he sank into with a grateful sigh of happy surprise. "I didn't know you were coming." "Neither did I." James's fake happy tone filled the air around them, and Sirius let a little laugh loose when he saw his wide eyes and nervous hands curled around a mug that would undoubtedly be filled with his dad's special brew tea. "I thought maybe you'd forgotten your keys, and when I answered the door, it was these 2. "Where's Dad?" Sirius asked, glancing around their living space. "Oh, you know how he is on long trips, Sirius darling." The bathroom. The three of them said simultaneously, Effie's head whipping back to the door to watch Sirius lean back into Remus's lanky frame, the man poised like a model in the doorway and letting a low laugh free. "And who is this, Effie asked as the bathroom door swung wide open, Fleamont stepping out, wiping wet hands on his trouser legs, and a grin breaking across his face when he spied Sirius. "Come give me a hug then, my boy." Sirius did, gladly, finding comfort in his pseudo-parents' hugs like he had since the day they'd met him. They hadn't changed, Fleamont Potter smelling of turpentine and dust, with calloused hands mottled with paint, Effie smelling like chai tea and hairspray. To him, that was what home smelt like, though he was suspicious that nowadays there would be a little of Remus's wood and spice and lavender mixed in there too. "Good to see you," Sirius said as he tugged Remus far enough inside that they could shut the door. "This is Remus, my boyfriend." James had a small smile on his face at the words, but it was quickly cowed by the look Sirius shot at him. But Effie quickly distracted him by doting on Remus and yanking the man down to her 5-foot-tall eye level, the way his back bent to accommodate almost comical. "It's lovely to meet you, dear. We've heard so much about you from James and Sirius both." "Ah, good things, I hope?" Remus said nervously, his words garbled from the way the small woman tugged at his cheeks. "Of course," Fleamont interjected, stepping forward to shake his hand and release him from his wife's clutches. "Jamie says you take care of our boys well." Oh, God. He was almost certainly blushing now. The implications of that too much when there was silicone spearing him wide open at Remus's direction. "I do my best," Remus said humbly, stepping back and wrapping one large palm around Sirius's hip, pulling the boy into him and pressing a gentle kiss to his hair. "How do we feel about lunch then, chaps?" Fleamont asked, clapping his hands together and rubbing them like an evil villain in a chunky knit jumper. "Your mother and I thought you could show us the sights, and we'd treat you to a nice meal. You too, of course, Remus." Remus glanced at Sirius as if to check he was welcome to join them before he accepted the invitation, gracious as always. It was cute, the way the man was working to endear his adoptive parents to him, clearing Effie's cup away and bringing her an extra biscuit, helping Fleamont with his collar when it was stuck up. He was being a gentleman. "I'm just going to get changed," Sirius spoke up, watching the group interact and deeming it safe enough to leave Remus alone with them. "Forgot to take anything with me to Ree's last night." "Just like our Sirius," Effie tutted, and Sirius turned to hide his blush at what his parents might infer staying the night could entail. "So forgetful sometimes, especially when he's excited, aren't you, darling?" "Mom," he whined as he left the room, panicking when soft footfalls followed him until he heard Remus excusing himself. When the door shut behind the pair, Remus opened his arms, and Sirius fell gladly into them. "I'm sorry, Moons. Didn't realize they'd be here. You don't have to come to lunch if you don't want to. We can make up an excuse about the club." "I want to be here," Remus reassured him, lips pressed against his head. "Though this has thrown a bit of a spanner into the works, hasn't it? Certainly as far as you and James and Regulus talking things out is concerned." "It'll be okay," Sirius said pensively, popping up onto his tiptoes for a kiss before he stepped out of their hug and started to strip without a flourish. "Just need game faces for lunch, and then tonight I can talk to him." "All right, Bug," Remus agreed with him, watching with heavy eyes as more and more of Sirius's lithe body was revealed. "Do you want your plug out? We didn't plan for this scene to involve your parents. I know that's a bit different for you." "Please?" "Of course." Remus came up behind him and put pressure on his lower back, helping him to bend low over his mattress. "We can always continue later on, or another day." He eased the plug out, setting it on Sirius's dirty laundry so the lube didn't stain his sheets. "Love the way your hole looks all stretched out for me, Sirius. Such a good boy for me, wet and gaping." Sirius bit back a moan at his words, trying to prevent himself from getting hard, knowing that his family were waiting for him just on the other side of the door. Instead, a broken gasping sound escaped his lips, muffled into the sheets. Remus held him in place while he looked, and he felt a pout cross his lips when the heat of the man's body against one hip disappeared, only a heavy palm remaining, holding him wide open. He choked on his breath when wet warmth swept over his hole. What he realized was Remus's tongue dipping into him a few times before the man hummed, the noise reverberating in shockwaves through Sirius, and stood back upright. "What?" Sirius reached for his Mooney. Did I just... What, Bug? You put your tongue inside my bum? Sirius' shout whispered, disbelieving at Remus's smug grin and quirked eyebrow. Is that a thing? Mm-hmm, Remus hummed, tugging his naked body into his and grasping his ass cheeks in his hands. It is a thing I quite enjoy. Did you like it? Nodding shyly, he rutted his slowly fattening cock up against Remus's leg, the dry rub just this side of pleasurable. Could we do that later? Remus's quiet groan made his pulse jump. Of course we can, of course. Could have you sit on my face, Work your little hole back on my tongue until you're sloppy and wet, just for me. Two of his fingers crept closer to Sirius's hole, pushing deep with the aid of the lube left behind by the plug, curling them just so for his boy's knees to buckle. If you're a good boy today, then I'll come over later on with some dinner, and you can have my fingers and then my tongue, okay? But only if you're good. You need to behave with Jamie and your parents. Then later on, you'll be mature when you talk to your brother and him, and then you'll get a treat. What am I supposed to do now? He asked in disbelief, gesturing at his hard cock, standing straight up against his abdomen as Remus's fingers worked slowly inside him, no longer pressing against his prostate. Oh dear, Remus tutted, withdrawing his fingers and grabbing the dirty laundry to clean them off. I guess you'll have to think bad thoughts. I'll wait for you outside. The man took a step towards his bedroom door, hand on the handle, when he said, Oh, and serious? Don't even think about touching yourself. You're mine. But Ree, he whined, cutting himself off when Remus slipped out of the door with a cheerful wave and greeted his family once more. So you two met at your new job? Euphemia asked, gesturing between them with a piece of carrot speared on her fork. That's right, Mama. Sirius swallowed his food before he answered, shooting a gentle smile at Remus, and then elaborating, Ree and his best friend Lily own Atelier, and we met at James and my interviews. Euphemia's face turned a tad icy, as much as the warmest woman in the world's expression could display contempt. You didn't say he was your boss, Sirius Beta. Remus began. I was initially hesitant to... Ree and I... Sirius spoke at the same time as him, the older man taking his empty hand in his, rubbing a gentle thumb over soft skin and bone. You don't think it's inappropriate to be fraternizing with your staff? There's a contract! Sirius blurted immediately, turning pink, when Euphemia and a silent until now Fleamont raised their eyebrows and gave him an unimpressed stare. A contract? Are you telling us? Fleamont said in a low voice. Are you telling your mother and I that you are contractually obligated to sleep with him? No! Remus yelped, shooting a death glare at James as he held a... shooting a death glare at James as he hid a grin behind his hand, clearly enjoying the lunchtime entertainment. No, what Sirius means is that there's a separate contract to his employment terms, which protect both him and the business. A sort of declaration that we are engaging in consensual behaviors. It was drawn up by our lawyers, and in no way places any requirement for Sirius to sleep with me. Euphemia and Fleamont looked at each other, communicating in a way that Sirius was familiar with. It used to be to decide how to punish James and Sirius when they'd been a little too mischievous. It sent a shiver of dread through him, and he held his breath when Effie nodded and turned back to face the silent pair. You will send your copy of this relationship agreement to your father and his lawyers will look over it. I take it you're open to amendments? Of course, Mrs. Potter. Remus agreed immediately. If you'd like, I can put you in touch with Alice. She handles all legal concerns for Lily and I. I also would just, like to reassure you that because of our relationship, I have no power over him in the business. He paused at the raise of Sirius's father's eyebrow, taking a sip of his water before continuing. In the beginning, I was his direct supervisor, as I am to all the staff on site. But when we grew closer and eventually entered into our relationship, I agreed that Lily would be in charge of all disciplinary matters relating to Sirius, and she handles any and all issues that he might have. I have no control over him at work, and any concerns I did have, I would have to take to her to be dealt with. Humph. Fremont nodded decisively and dug right back into his steak, although his wife was still studying him intently. The silence was awkward enough that Sirius picked up his fork and began eating again, contemplating the details that Remus had just revealed to his parents in an effort to endear them to him. Just as he began to swallow his bite of chicken, Euphemia spoke once more. And it's a sex club that you own, is that right? Coughing, backslapping, being fed a drink of water while tears streamed from his eyes, he shot a dark look at his brother who was cackling, head thrown back. Looking to his left, he saw Remus's concern and the underlying stress of the meal, only indicated by the slight sheen of sweat at his temples. We're a BDSM club, which offers guests the chance to play in a safe space, without fear of judgment. Remus said quietly, which, considering the surrounding clientele, was probably a good idea. When Sirius was calm, he dropped his hand to Remus's knee and said, It's not seedy, Mama. They do classes on Japanese rope work and how to treat people properly. It's actually really awesome how hard Remus and Lily have worked to create such a sanctuary. Thank you, love. Remus pressed a kiss to the side of Sirius's forehead, the action making the smaller boy hum and lean into his soft gesture. Sirius is right. We work with couples and individuals to develop safe practices and bring in consultants when necessary. We're constantly training and looking to improve our business, and we have very strict rules. The entire building has a no alcohol policy and 24-hour on-site security and medics. You're open 24/7? Effie asked, interestedly, and Sirius tried to ignore the get out of this one look that James shot him. No, Remus spoke. We have a small number of guests that we invite to be a part of the VIP scheme that allows them to keep a suite upstairs. They're highly regulated, and we require an extensive background check before they're even considered. So you have security for your VIP guests? Fremont asked, now appearing more interested than scrutinizing. To protect our liability, it's a requirement of our insurance, but also for them and their guests. Sometimes someone has an unrelated medical emergency and they have to hit the panic button. Other times things go too far and they need help. Sirius's father hummed, wiping his mouth after placing his knife and fork together in the center of his clean plate. That's very interesting. Is that modeled on something you and your partner saw elsewhere? Sirius pouted minutely when Fremont called Lily Remus's partner before it smoothed back out, remembering that Remus was his, locked in and official. Probably. I'm sure we're not the first to undertake it. Staff who work in the security room require rigorous training, and we make sure they're well versed in the world of BDSM before they're allowed to work unsupervised. We like to pride ourselves on our staff's professionalism, and it's important that in those sort of emergent situations, nobody feels judged, you know? I do. Fremont nodded. Good lad. At the affirmation, some of the tension holding Sirius's back straight left his body, and he relaxed a little into his seat, sipping at his drink with one hand in his boyfriend's lap. So? Sirius asked Euphemia as they followed their crowd out of the restaurant. Do you approve? He's lovely, Sirius Beta, she reassured him. But you're still going to send your father that contract, yes? We need to make sure you're not being compromised by a wolf in sheep's clothing. Like Remus would ever hurt me, he scoffed under his breath, making sure that his remark was quiet enough that the man in question wouldn't hear him. Not unless you asked him nicely, yes? Mama! Sirius exclaimed, flushing bright red as she laughed at him, pulling him closer with an arm around his waist, her graying hair pressing into his temple comfortingly. Oh, please, you think your father and I haven't? La 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 la, Sirius sang loudly, placing his hands over his ears as he ran away from her smirk and plastered himself to Remus's back, the man making a low oof noise as he was hit with a human cannonball, yelling over his shoulder, I never want to hear you finish that sentence, ever. Remus POV. They'd waved Mr. and Mrs. Potter off a little after 2 o'clock. The pair headed further north for the weekend, a little bit of an escape from the city. Having officially given Sirius their tentative approval, Euphemia had left him with a salacious remark about her plans for the weekend. Remus unable to suppress his low chuckle at Sirius and James's disgust at the thought of their parents doing exactly what the two of them like to do with their significant others. Come on, Bug. Did you think they weren't having sex? Remus asked with a smile, seeing the two brothers get on, united by their horror. It made him happy. I hoped not. I don't want to think about it. Me either, James chimed in, locking their flat door behind him as Regulus re-entered the building, the temperature in the living space dropping back to somewhere near icy as the couple sat on the sofa, Remus pulling up a chair from the dining table and Sirius standing up, glaring at them. Does anyone want tea? Remus asked, hands rubbing his thighs as he tried to parse whether he should leave or stay. 3 sets of eyes snapped to him from where they were all avoiding each other, Sirius breaking the silence with a quiet, Yes, please, Mooney. With agreement from all parties, Remus set about making the drinks, feeling out of sorts in this flat where he was so much older, like a school teacher resolving an argument. He was glad when he heard James begin speaking from behind him. So, where do you want to start, Siri? At the beginning. When? And where? Sirius's voice was flat and thick, and Remus just knew that if he turned and pulled his boy into his arms, he would break, the feeling of betrayal too strong for him. No, I want to hear it from Reg. Oh, Regulus started, only to be interrupted by Sirius again. Let's start with you leaving. When did that happen? The whistle of the kettle distracted him and prevented the first part of the story from reaching his ears as he bustled around the kitchen with tea bags and a carton of milk, making each cup to the requested specifications before taking them one by one over to the coffee table, handing the final mug to Sirius with a kiss to the side of his head before settling in to hear what the boys had to say. And then that summer between Eton and when I was supposed to be going to Oxford, it got a lot worse. I downloaded Twitter to keep up with the election and was interning with Father, and I started interacting with people outside of who they'd chosen for me to be friends with. It helped me to realize the spew they'd been filling our heads with was exactly that. I started reading outside of the family library, researching political agendas, and just like that, you were queer and ready to leave? Sirius scoffed, flicking his eyes to Remus and what the older man thought he was hoping to be a derisive dismissal. When his expression was not reciprocated, Sirius pouted and waved a hand, gesturing for Regulus to continue speaking. Of course not. By that point, Barty and I had been fooling around for a little while at school. I was quite comfortable with... He just railroaded through Sirius's outburst at the revelation. With my sexuality. I'm a bisexual man, and assumed that I could marry whoever they picked for me and hope for the best, do the whole baby thing and carry on the Black family bloodline. Mm-hmm, Sirius hummed, dropping into a couch and then settling crossed legs on the opposite side of the coffee table to Regulus and James. Who did they pick for you to marry? Flora. Sirius barked out a laugh that confused Remus until he was suddenly included in the conversation, his boy directing his next statement Remus's way. Flora is our second cousin. Like father, like son, hey, Reg? Safe to say, I was not best pleased. Regulus's face twisted, the man taking a sip of his tea and relaxing back into the soft cushions before he opened his mouth to continue, although this time it was Remus who cut him off. I'm sorry, they wanted you to marry your cousin? Best way to keep it in the family, Ree. Sirius shrugged. Historically, a lot of blacks have married their cousins. Our parents were cousins, and occasionally a suitable, wealthy, reputable member of the upper echelons of society are brought in to stop the inbreeding from having any more effect than keeping the money concentrated and our noses straight. That's so grim, we know. Before I left, they were talking about marrying me off to Narcissa, but she fell in love with a Malfoy, thankfully. Awful people, but at least I got out of marrying the wetch. He felt like he'd been sucker punched. Sirius hadn't told him much about his family beyond the circumstances of his leaving, and the revelations were so shocking he needed to have his hands on his boy. Come here, Bug, Remus said softly, Sirius shooting him a questioning look and then rising to his feet. When he was settled in his lap, sat sideways, suitable for present company and the story to continue, Regulus began talking again. Yes, so Flora and I were to be married, but I managed to convince Father that it would be better for me to finish my degree before that happened. After all, Flora had only just turned 16, and so she wasn't ready to be married yet. What was 3 more years? Sirius blew out a heavy breath, and Remus pressed a kiss to his temple and tried to keep his touches soft, comforting. Good plan, although I can't believe they went for it. Well, you see, Sirius, I tended to behave, so they never suspected anything beyond my intentions to devote myself completely to my studies. He placed his cup heavily on the table and sighed. So I suffered out the summer and went off to university. When I got there, I changed colleges and switched my course, so I wasn't with anyone I'd been friends with at Eton, and Barty had gone to Edinburgh, so we could still talk. I got a job outside the city at a hotel, worked as a receptionist as much as I could and saved up. And in my final year, I changed my name by deed poll and rented a flat in Manchester with an unconnected bank account. I went home for Easter, feigned food poisoning to get out of the Malfoy's gala, and packed up everything I wanted. And then I left. They didn't notice until after my graduation that my room was empty, and when I didn't come home, they started blowing up my phone. I told them I was going, and I went. Not very dramatic, truth be told. What did they tell people? Sirius breathed, staring dazedly at his brother as Remus played with his fingers, working them out of the tight fists he'd clenched them into. They can't have just let you go, just like that. Well, I was already in Manchester. I'd bought a new phone. I had a place to live. They didn't have anything to hold over me. I threw the phone they paid for in a random bin in the train station, and that was that. I'm probably working as a missionary or something to humble myself. You know how they are. And then you ran into James? We did, James said, quieting quickly as Sirius shot the boy a glare. Sorry, Siri. Regulus grasped his hand with his own, pulling it into his lap and threading their fingers together, the action making Sirius frown, and turned to hide his face in Remus's neck. Smoothing his hair back, Remus began to whisper words he hoped were encouraging. Come on, Cuttlebug. Just hear them out, and then we can go home. You don't have to forgive them straight away. You know that. I've got you. It's my fault we didn't tell you, Sirius. James was so excited to tell you that I had left. Regulus's tone seemed to encourage Sirius to look back at them, although his face was set like stone. But I wasn't sure you'd react well, considering how we parted. And so I thought it was best to see if James and I's dalliance was anything substantial enough to... Really? Sirius's voice was small, hurt in a way that Remus had never heard it before, and for that, he was grateful. The relationship you could have with your brother relied solely on whether you wanted to keep fucking his best friend? I mean that little to you? No, that's not what I meant to say. Sirius. Regulus rubbed rough hands over his face, sighing deeply as he seemed to parse his thoughts. I meant that short of me running into you the same way I'd run into James, there was no clean way for us to reconnect that didn't include you feeling bruised about James's involvement. I wanted to be sure that James thought it was worth this. His hands were shaking, and Remus felt sorry for him. The man on the receiving end of a death glare trying to piece words together to appease two parties. He didn't think you'd react well at all. James interrupted him. Despite me telling him that you would be more pleased than anything else that he had escaped, he was still worried. I knew that me lying would just make it worse, but I wanted to respect him, Siri. I thought that even if you were upset, we could get through it, but Reggie was more fragile. At the words, Regulus scowled at him. I am not fragile, dickhead. But he's right. I thought that your relationship would be able to recover, although the way you found out clearly wasn't what we intended to happen. Clearly, Sirius scoffed, pushing up from Remus's lap to pace again. It still doesn't stop me from feeling betrayed. You couldn't have brought him round and engineered me walking in on something a little more PG rated? Did I really have to find you on your knees, Jamie? You don't need to shame him, Sirius. Oh, fuck off, Reggie. That's not what I'm fucking doing. One, look at this. He gestured between himself and Remus. And you can tell that I'm the one getting on my knees here. Regulus flinched at that image, and Sirius laughed meanly. Yeah, not the nicest of image to be surprised with. Your brother on his knees for someone, is it? Now, imagining walking in and finding not only that, but for the person he's kneeling for to be his little brother you thought you'd abandoned to a family of homophobes and racists. Jesus, Sirius, we're sorry about that. You know we are. James sighed. I didn't expect for you to come back home, and if I had, I never would have brought him over. That's worse, Sirius exclaimed. You were hoping to keep this a secret for another month? He was working himself up, tears of betrayal and anger in his eyes. Bug, I think... No! Sirius shouted at him. I just can't get past the fact that you were conspiring against me. We're all adults here. He sighed, taking 2 steps to cross the distance between him and Remus, and whispering a quiet, Sorry, Mooney, before turning to face them again. You could have brought him around and let us talk this out before you let me know that you intended to date each other. At any point in the last 6 weeks? 7. 7 weeks! Sirius shook his head. And at any point you could have sat me down and told me that you were free, and here, and your own person. We could have gone to brothers' counseling, or whatever. Regulus let out a little laugh, the sound making Sirius pause, and then almost explode with rage. And why is that funny? We clearly fucking need it, Regulus. Because that's what I do, Sirius, the younger man explained. I switched to psychology and counseling. I have a little office that I work from, and I specialize in family trauma. Sirius smiled, a small, proud thing, and then he seemed to get angrier. Well then, surely that's worse. You could have seen how this would be re-traumatizing for me. But there are 2 sides. Oh, and yours is more important? To me, yes, Regulus shouted, standing from his place in the sofa so the brothers were locked in, eye to eye. I considered all the scenarios in my head, and I wanted to wait until James and I had a strong enough relationship that we would be able to support each other when you imploded like this. Sirius's face crumpled, the boy recoiling into Remus's arms as a silent tear rolled down his cheek. A thick breath sucked in and held, shakily released, and followed by the words, I am not the bad guy here. You did this, knowing what it would look like in the end, and willing or not, James was with you. Sirius, please, just... No, Jamie. I'm going to pack a bag and go stay with Ree for a little while. Sirius glanced up at him, and he nodded, already mentally planning all the aftercare they'd need to get through this, the healthy ways to help Sirius work through his anger. I said it last night, and I'll say it again. I love you both, so much, and I'm really, really glad that you didn't marry Flora, and you escaped to find out who you really are. I'm proud of you for doing it all by yourself, Reg. I really am. But I'm angry and sad, and I feel like two really important people didn't care enough about how their actions would affect me. So I'm going to go. Will you give me your phone number, please, Reg? Of course. Yeah, you can. Regulus fumbled for his phone, rattling off a number that Sirius inputted and then nodded at the pair, clearly satisfied with whatever chore list was in his head. We're going to go, and I'll see you at work, Jamie. Regulus, I'll call you and we can maybe have lunch or a coffee at some point and talk this out, but right now I'm too angry to do this. I love you, Siri, James said sadly, staring with wide eyes at his pseudo-brother. I love you too, Sirius said quietly, walking away from the pair into his bedroom. He packed a bag in record time, reappearing in front of Remus and proclaiming, "Ready." With that, they left.